speaking on their behalf is our very own Michelle McCann.
There it goes. Good evening. I'm Michelle McCann, and I'm proud to be here to represent the Alzheimer Society of Nova Scotia and as Dorothy McCann's daughter. Before I go on, and I promise I'm not copying Raj, this is written right here, can I ask for a show of hands? How many of you have a loved one with Alzheimer's? And another show of hands, how many are a caregiver for someone with dementia? There's a lot of us. Thank you for sharing. I'm not going to share a bunch of statistics with you tonight, but here are a couple that resonated with me. 72% of people diagnosed with dementia are women, and 70% of caregivers for those diagnosed are women. It's affecting hundreds, if not thousands, of women and families in Colchester County. My mom and I are two of those women. She was diagnosed with dementia 5 years ago, but our journey started long before that. 7 years ago, my dad was in the hospital here in Truro, and a nurse asked if Mom had dementia because she had noticed some early signs. I shrugged it off. Mom just hates hospitals. She's fine. Everything's fine. Then Dad would occasionally say, I think something's wrong with your mother. But we carried on, we adapted, and we compensated. And then, one day, my mom woke up in 1969, in the middle of a really traumatic time in her life. She relived it for days and weeks and months. She knew Dad, she knew me, but our house was no longer her home, and all she wanted to do was go home. Dad took her to Emerge, where she was diagnosed with a UTI. His concerns about her cognition were poo-pooed, and a round of antibiotics was prescribed, and he was told she'd be fine, but she wasn't. So I called her doctor, I called the seniors clinic, but it ended up being 5 months before she had an appointment and a diagnosis. We spent those 5 months in quiet chaos. Dad was her primary caregiver while I was living in Halifax, worrying and trying to apply logic to the most illogical of diseases. Mom would try to call her mother, who died in 1977. She'd wake Dad up at 3 a.m. because there was a lady with a baby standing on our street, but it was our mailbox. If Dad told her she'd drop the Kleenex, she'd say, I did no such thing, as if he'd accused her of murder. But a diagnosis didn't improve things. Mom refused to believe anything was wrong. She didn't need meds, she didn't need help. She was confused and she was angry, and we were ill-equipped. There were a lot of arguments and a lot of tears. I moved back to Truro to try to manage things and support my dad, and when the situation became so bad that I feared for his health, I made another call. Our family was described as a powder keg, and emergency placement was recommended. One day I told Mom we were going to visit a friend. Dad was so depressed he didn't get out of bed to say goodbye, and so I drove her to a nursing home, and I left her there. I've gone on for a while without even mentioning the Alzheimer Society, and that's because at the time I had no idea they were there, ready and able to help. If I had called their support line, they could have coached us on navigating the medical system, talked us through the diagnosis, and given tangible support to me and my dad. We wouldn't have felt so alone. They offer support groups where you can talk about what's happening at home, and you're met with nodding, understanding heads, and if needed, hugs. And most importantly, knowledge that others are on the same roller coaster. They offer education for those diagnosed and their families on what to anticipate. No two journeys are the same, but the Alzheimer Society has a wealth of information and knowledge they can and will share. They also offer public education in an effort to increase awareness and decrease myths and stigma about Alzheimer's. It's not just a normal part of aging, it's an epidemic that's stealing our parents, grandparents, husbands, and wives. If the Alzheimer Society is chosen this evening, those programs will continue to make a diagnosis less terrifying for local families, because the money will stay in Colchester County to support and grow programs in our community. Today, my mom is content and comfortable, but she's disappearing. The person who gave me life rarely knows who I am, or that her husband, my darling dad, passed away last year. But I tell her I love her. On good days, she says, I love you too. Sometimes I get love you too, hun, which is great. Other days I get good for you, or thank you. And you have to know my mom to know how funny that is. So tonight I'll leave you with her words. Good for you for being here and supporting these 3 amazing charities, and thank